you for being here. The past week witnessed the presentation of the budget from the Minister of Finance, and predictably, we have seen the opposition commenting on the budget. Most of the comments I would characterize as dim-witted and comic in their analysis. But we'll get to speaking about the budget shortly. That event has been overtaken by another charade, a fiasco, that is typical of the engagement of the opposition in the public domain and with each other. So a few days ago, we heard about this attempt to get back together after the public separation for political purposes between the APNU and the AFC. The first that we heard of this was, I think, a newspaper article saying that there was an engagement between APNU and the AFC, and they've reached an accord. And as part of that accord, they're going to work together in various phases, and that Mr. Norton would be the presidential candidate. And shortly thereafter, in the, I think, the heat of the evening or the night, Nigel Hughes hardly engaged the media to speak about the agreement that they had signed. First of all, he lamented the fact that the agreement was in the public domain. He cited confidentiality clause, and then he said that the agreement was on life support. An agreement that they had just inked is already on life support. And if this doesn't tell the people of this country about the comic nature of the characters that we're dealing with, I think it's tragic, but in a way it's also comic. That two serious or seemingly serious political parties that were partners for such a long time, moments after they signed an agreement, they would say that it's on life support. But the fact of the matter is that these two parties are on life support themselves, especially the AFC. And I think this is an attempt to cling on to the PNC to ensure that they maintain some modicum of credibility at the next polls. Because you cannot deny, as Norton said, that the PNC has more support in this country than the AFC has ever had. And so we heard prior to the signing of the agreement that the AFC met over the weekend and they selected Nigel Hughes as their presidential candidate. And I suspect that was to put some pressure on the negotiations and to stake a claim, maybe in the future, to that position should there be a coalition. So we we have seen this before. This what Norton's position has been. Norton has been in the public domain as saying that the next coalition, that his party selected him as the presidential candidate, and the next person, the next presidential candidate for his party would have to come from his party or for any coalition, because they're the largest, they would be the largest part of any coalition. From the PPP's perspective, we don't care too much who their presidential candidate is, because they're going to lose the elections in any case. So, but it's very interesting to us to see how AFC is trying to strong arm its way and to put pressure on Norton to back down from that position. So Nigel Hughes made it very clear when asked by the reporters, no, they're not going to, they have not selected a candidate, and that will have to follow some scientific criteria and other criteria. Now, you recall that I spoke with you about their plan earlier. The plan was, this was like months ago, when they shafted Sherrod Duncan and put Nigel Hughes as the leader of the AFC. And even then, they had a plot. This was what they were discussing clearly. They were saying to Ramjatan and the others were saying, we will do the polls, conduct the polls, and show that Norton is very unpopular, and then we will secure the presidential candidate's position in the coalition for Nigel Hughes. This is an old playbook they're following. They said that even before Nigel Hughes managed to work his way into the leadership of the party by the old cabal. So that is not new. And I think they're hoping somehow to pressure Norton. But there are a few things. So that's what happened. But for analytical purposes, I think the people of the country have to look to some key issues. First of all, why did Nigel Hughes not want the agreement released? Because the agreement, as you have seen, that's in the public domain, speaks about not sharing any of these documents, including the one that they signed publicly, that they must not release these documents. And I believe the reason that Nigel Hughes did not want that to happen is because this document bears an uncanny resemblance to the Cummings-Burg Accord. In fact, much of the language from this agreement is extracted from the Cummings-Burg Accord. Now, we know what the Cummings-Burg Accord was. This was an agreement that they struck between the parties in 2015, outlining some common platforms that they spoke of, and then sharing the spoils of the government. So the spoils of the government, they're listed who will be doing what, the role of the prime minister, ministerial responsibilities, a whole range of issues. This agreement, again, is similar to the Cummings-Burg Accord. So we know the Cummings-Burg Accord, they never kept any of the provisions of the accord. They spoke about helping people and all sorts of things. They betrayed what they signed. So they didn't want this document to come into the public domain again. And then what they did effectively they structured the agreement in two phases now. One, let's have a common platform so they can campaign together. And they don't want the second phase to be reflected here, which is the division of the spoils. Who will get what in government? Well, they can talk as much as they want because they're not going to win. But they're already talking about who will get which ministerial position and who will become prime minister and which person will get the oil and gas portfolio and all of that. That's the second part of the hidden part. Phase 2, they call it. Sharing the spoils of government, they call it. So right now, this has been in the public domain, and people are not excited about it because they see it's the same old playbook that they're using. Now, when asked by a reporter, I saw at his hurriedly convened press conference reflecting panic that somehow Norton may have succeeded in saying he's the presidential candidate. And Nigel Hughes saying, what about me? I'm hoping to contest this too. So then he was asked by a reporter, what would be different now? It's the same faces, and you betrayed the people of the country. You did not keep any of your manifesto promises. You promised lower taxation. The reporter didn't go into that, but I'm speaking about what they did not do. Promised lower taxation, we had higher taxation. Promised help for the pensioners and children, etc. That didn't happen. Promised more jobs, we lost jobs. Promised opportunities for young people, it became a haven for geriatrics. That was the last government. And so I can go down the long list of how they betrayed people. So someone asked Nigel Hughes, it's the same faces. What are you coming? It's nothing new. You had the Cummings-Berg Accord. This is a new agreement, but it's similar to the Cummings-Berg Accord. Why would people believe you? Same faces. And he said, with a straight face, he said, oh, there are new faces now. Now, the last time I checked, he was the chairman of the AFC when the Cummings-Berg Accord was signed. Ramjatan was the leader. Trotman was a key member of the party at that time. Patterson was there. Cathy Hughes was there. Beverly Allard was there. These are the same faces from the past, and he said, oh, we're new now. The only thing that is new is the new lies that they're telling to people. That's new. Well, that was not new too, because they did that in the past. So what's new? Just at a straight face, this man would say, oh, we're new faces now. It's the same old cabal doing the same old thing and hoping they can pull wool over the eyes of the people of this country. So he was asked about the negotiations. And he said that a gentleman called Alston Short is the negotiator on behalf of the AFC. This was the same person who represented the AFC in the negotiations of the Cummings-Berg Accord of 2015. So Nigel Hughes talks about new faces and he talks about corruption. But I hope that the people of this country would realize how moribund and how sick the AFC is to try to cheat us, fool us once again about lofty politics and their care for the people of this country and their love for transparency. Now, you would recall Alston Short. Now, there is a case in court where Patterson is charged, and also this company owned by Alston Short, or two companies owned by him, now are party to this court matter. And it refers to the purchase of some scales. Now, in 2016, yes, the APNU AFC government decided to sole source the purchase of some scales. Patterson Ministry requested that these these scales be sole sourced from two connected companies. Both of these companies are owned by Alston Short. Their negotiator in 2015 and their current negotiator, a Jamaican national. They took the cabinet paper and told the cabinet, Jordan, that these two companies owned by Alston Short have the requisite experience, that they had been in business for over 15 years. I don't know if they were in the business of scale, but just that they were in business 15 years, which turned out to be a lie. Both companies, one was in existence for 6 months prior to that, and the other one 4.5 years. These are both companies owned by Alston Short. So they went to the cabinet, and the cabinet awarded a contract for $70-odd million to supply these scales. The contract said, when signed, said that 50% of the money will be paid up front and another 50% upon receipt of the scales. They paid 100% of the money up front. From the signing of the contract, they paid 100% of the money to the company. So the scales were subjected to audit reports. They never arrived. In the APNU period, the Auditor General spoke about these scales. They don't know where they are. They heard they're at the GNIC wharf, but nobody could verify them. When we got into office, this was from 2016, we were told, the ministry was told that there are some boxes on the wharf and the scales may be in them. We hired a forensic auditor. We have the report of the forensic audit. And the forensic auditor said, I was never shown the scale. They were told me there are 6 pallets. I saw some 3 boxes there, but I never managed to get into the boxes. So we filed a court case, and they responded. And then Nandalal told me, because he had said this before, he said that the week when the case was called up, and they said, the defense said, and now Nigel Hughes is defending Patterson in this case, that the scales are on the wharf. Mysteriously, the same weekend, the bond was razed to the ground. The fire burnt everything to the ground, the La Park and Bond, and everything went to the ground. So he said to me, it was just after we were supposed to go now to verify whether the scale was on the wharf. Same weekend, fire razed it to the ground. So we never saw a single scale. Patterson was in direct contact with this person. Now he's minister. How could you sole source a scale from your political consultant who had companies with no requisite experience? How did you know they were supplying scales if this was not collusion? I suspect it was payment. We never got any scales. No scales came to Ghana, but 70-odd million was paid, in breach of the agreement too, which said that you should not pay it until the scale arrive here. I hope that the media will talk to Nigel Hughes and Patterson about this, because they get away with all of these things. The dirtiness, the lack of transparency. Until now, they're trying to prove that Cathy Hughes, when she gave herself in her own ministry contracts to her own company, it somehow wasn't illegal. It's illegal if the PPP were to give somebody else, Hitch and Jam, a contract or someone, but not a minister giving herself work in her own ministry. Double standards. And I'll come to that a little bit later. But I hope that the media will ask them about Alston Short, who is their negotiator once again for this new accord. Now, if you want to see how bad the Cummingsburg Accord and all the things that they lied about, just read the Cummingsburg Accord. And this is a reflection of this again. Oh, we're going to have a joint platform, explore about what we want to do and how we want to campaign. This agreement, they didn't want the public to see it. It's out in the public domain. They said it's on life support now. The parties are on life support. They're going to come up. They have to find a way of working together. We said this before. What are they going to do? They're going to bring together all the Flotsams and Jetsams in the country, the one-member party and everything else, the WP, and call it the coalition, and they have all the plans for Ghana. Just made a mess of their 5 years in government, but they expect us to forget that. And it's predictable. Everything that they do is predictable. And they're hoping to muscle Norton out. I think Norton putting up a strong fight, but they're hoping to muscle him out here. Norton knows that if he's not a candidate, he'd be nothing. He'd lose everything in there. He would lose everything in that area. So this is an important issue that we have to address. The second thing that I wanted to talk a bit about today is the announcement, the press conference, I think it was, that the chair of GCOM held, where she dealt definitively with the question of biometrics. So somehow in this country, the APNU has made the whole campaign around biometrics as their fight for transparency around elections, or for the 2025 elections. I think it's a clever attempt to get away from their past. And the past is, the recent past I'm speaking of, where they sought to rig the elections. And by the way, I think in the Starbuck News, they have some articles about rigging of elections. And I saw it. They have an article here, and they said the coalition lost the 2020 general elections, but challenged the results and stayed in office for 5 extra months. The credibility of both groups, that APNU and AFC, suffered during this period as their supporters were accused of trying to rig the coalition back into office. Now, it's an accurate, up to a point statement. Yes, they tried to rig the elections, APNU and AFC. So the Starbuck News had it right. But it wasn't the supporters. It wasn't the supporters. The supporters were misled into believing they won the elections. It was the same leaders. It's the same Catiyus and Patterson and Ramjatan with their conspiracy theory about Russians and lying about their SOPs. Patterson spoke explicitly that he had seen these SOPs that showed that their figures match Mingo's. It's not the supporters of the AFC or the PNC. It is the leadership. This needs to be pointed out. Not because we shouldn't be blaming ordinary people who supported them for the role that these crooks played in trying to steal the elections. And so they're trying desperately to get away from that track record. Every day you hear some permutation of what happened in the past. Some new issue. So now the new one is about biometrics. And they're making it seem as though this is something new. So biometrics were collected from people when, in the past, the fingerprints were collected from people when they registered. Those fingerprints would enter the database. They were digitized, and those fingerprints were cross-matched with each other. We used to send those to Jamaica to look for duplicates. So you had biometrics collected in the past, which are the fingerprint, and they were digitized or put in an electronic form and utilized to ensure that you didn't have duplication on the list. They're making it seem as though they want now electronic fingerprinting. This is the biometric they're talking about. So the chair said there is nothing wrong. The commission can make a decision about what form you collect or store biometrics in. Because it's almost, for me, it's nothing new. It was collected in a manual form and then became digital in the past. So if you collect it in a digital form and keep it digitally, there's nothing big about it. So it's not a new issue that they're trying to make, and it's not about biometrics or no biometrics. It is what they want to use it for, and that is what they spoke of. If you listen to Vincent Alexander and all of the others, then you would realize that they want to use it for an unconstitutional purpose, which is to prevent people from voting if your fingerprints, say you show up at the polling place, you have a blackout and you can't use your fingerprint. You know, they can't match your fingerprint. Or there is some glitch in the system. Then you lose the right to vote. You cannot lose your right to vote. That has been decided on sometime before. It says if you're Guyanese and you're 18 years and older, you are eligible to register and vote. Claudette Singh herself, when we dealt with the use of even an ID card to vote in the elections in 1997, that they agreed to, we all agreed to, She ruled it unconstitutional, and we lost a part of our term because of that. We had to go back to elections, the PPP. So you can't prevent. You can use it as one of the means for verification, but you can't use it as a final mean. They want that to happen, and the moment it happens, like in 1997, they agreed with it before the election. It happened. We used the ID card to vote. People who didn't have an ID card or document couldn't vote. And then just after they lost, they went and challenged it. That's precisely what they want to do. They know they're going to lose the elections. They will go say, you can't vote if you don't have the electronic fingerprint. You lose your right to vote. And then after the elections, they'll come back and say, you know what, that was unconstitutional. You shouldn't have lost your right to vote. This is where they want to head. The plot is clear. Even from opposition, their mindset is crooked around stealing elections. They suck the egg of stealing elections for a long time. So they have to pursue something now to try to steal the elections. And so the chair said quite clearly, there's nothing wrong. So there's claiming vindication. Oh, the chair said there's nothing wrong collecting biometric. But that's what she said. She said, there's nothing inherently wrong collecting it in electronic form. You're collecting it in manual form. Nothing inherently wrong there. But one, to go back and do this en masse again, it's going to take a long time, delay the elections, and we don't want that to happen. And two, you can't use it, even if you collect it, to stop a person voting, because it would be unconstitutional. So they went hot under the collar, all of them, because it does not fit in with their narrative. And so Nigel Hughes has to comment on it, and Norton, and you see the Lincoln Lewis and the WPA and the whole gang of them. The whole gang of them, because that's what they don't want. And so they vilify the chairman now. Oh, she votes with the PPP, but so she must say it's not unconstitutional. We must deny people the right to vote. What if you, hypothetically, any of you here, you travel out the country and they were doing this, collecting your fingerprint, which is already there in manual form and possibly digitized. They now come back to collect it in electronic form. And you're out the country and they say, you show up at the poll, you come back the day before the elections, and they say you can't vote because you didn't come in to give your fingerprint. You lose the right to vote. This is a sacred right. That's precisely what they want. Just imagine the amount of confusion you would have at the polling places, in every polling place, because that means you're giving each presiding officer now the right to decide who will vote and who wouldn't vote. So assuming one is pro-PPP or pro-APNU or something like that, they should not have that right. You can't have 2,500 presiding officers deciding on their own who has a right to vote. The Constitution confers that right on us. That's the confusion they want in the polling places. And this is what they're working towards. So that's why most people have seen through this. The private sector commission has seen through this. People are issuing statements supportive of the chair. But they're vilifying the chairman of the elections commission, saying she supports the PPP. What she does, she's been consistent in her ruling. She has to preserve the right to vote. She has to act in a constitutional manner. And that's what she is doing. But if you do that, you've run afoul of the APNU and AFC, because you don't fit into their plot. So That's the second issue I wanted to address. And so the third issue has to do with the budget. And my comment at the beginning, speaking about APNU and AFC, what they said since the budget was presented. So we know that many of them are amateurish, inept at these issues. So I'm going to go through a few. There are lots of nonsensical things, and it really hurts my head to go through a lot of these things. But sometimes maybe an ordinary person might be seduced by it. You know, they listen, they get weary sometimes. And it's repeated so often that maybe people might be misled, because a lot of people sometimes don't go to the source documents. They just listen to a program on television or radio and say, that's the fact. So we've heard comments like, the budget has nothing for anyone. Budget doesn't help poor people. Friends and family of the PPP will get all of the benefits. We can't eat roads and bridges. They could not do anything because they didn't have oil money. You can't find PPP. Things are so hard that PPP has given a tax break for second jobs. So you need a second job to make a living. That the size of the debt has ballooned. That the deficit is expanding. That there's nothing for poverty in the budget. That one-off interventions can't deal with poverty. These are some of the comments that we've heard from them. Nothing very profound, and not even backed up by arguments, but just declarations, because it's a lazy way of responding to a technical document or a plan for the country. It doesn't require much research and thought. And this is characteristic of material emanating from the opposition. Not very profound, not very thoughtful, not very researched. They just say things off the top of their head because they sound good. You know, friends and family, that's easy to say, friends and family. Or we can't eat roads and bridges. They did a lot of research to get to that, Nigel Hughes. You know, we can't eat. He did a big research into the infrastructure of the country and what it's directed to. So I'm going to go through a few of these things so that you have a perspective on how stupid, silly sometimes these things are. And if we hope that this inept bunch of people can ever chart the way forward for our country, the leadership of the AFC and APNU, then we're in for a shock. We should have seen them in government to understand by now that they're bad for the country, bad for policy making, etc. So let's start off with the promises they're making. So our budget is not, doesn't have anything for anyone. Every measure that we announce, they're multiplying it by 3. That's the factor. and say, we will do this when we get into office. So I think within the bunch, like the Mai Pauls and Nigel Hughes and the others, they just off the top of their head say, PP is saying this, let's multiply by 3 and make the promise. Well, we recognize that you can't believe anything they say. Nothing. It's because they said it before. They didn't do it. They failed our children, our pensioners. They promised a double old age pension, all of that. So let us examine just one. They made a lot of this, like the PNC and AFC made a lot of these things, and they circulated it. PPP, what PPP promised here, and what they're going to promise. So on this one, just this one sheet, I'm not going to go through all because I think all of their promises, it's garbage. Because nobody believes anything they say anyhow. So cash grant, PPP, one-off, unpredictable. Jagdeo referred to it, or anyhow, don't worry, they're cussing me there. So this is their promise now. Versus APNU in the next government. Regular guaranteed, over 100,000 a month, cash and benefits for households. So that's over 100,000 there. Plus 100,000 hard cash twice a year for adults. So that's 300 and over 300,000 a month, because if you multiply 100,000 a month, it will give you about 1.2 billion a year, million a year. So if you take 1.2 million per year and you multiply by 300,000 households, and that's a small number, we have more, but say you multiply that, do you know how much you're coming up with per year to give out here? That's nearly $1 trillion Guyana dollars. Guess how much money we collected the budget this year for oil? Half of that. But they want to give out twice as much of all the oil money that we collected. And this is only for cash grants and stuff like that. Forget roads and water and electricity and salaries and pensions and everything else. This is what they will give you. Twice as much as we have from we collect from the oil and gas sector. More than the total revenue of the country now. Because when you add oil and gas revenue with non-oil and gas revenue at the current level, it's less than this figure. But they would hand it all out. It's nonsense, pure nonsense. And this is just one promise. They have a long list like this. A big list of stupid things. I don't know if they don't do calculations to say this, but it sounds good to people. You can't. So this is consistent with Nigel Hughes and the others. Share out what we don't have, what we have not collected, twice as much. Don't build any roads, don't build schools, don't build hospitals, don't build any power plants, because you can't eat infrastructure. Share every cent out. This is their economic policy. The economic policy of APNU, AFC. So when you listen to their promises, it just, the believability, you have to stretch your imagination into a long distance to believe anything they say, because they promise off the top of their head. They've never done this before. They just, so, well, they did it before. This is their promises. So that's the first thing. Their promises, you can't believe anything that they say. So if Norton goes and says we're going to do this, show him this one sheet. $1 trillion he wants to give out to people. And we have in the budget this year, only half of that from the oil sector. And it's more than the total revenue. So you can't get anything else. Don't buy no drugs to the hospital, don't pay wages and salaries, don't do anything else. This is what they give out. Everybody would recognize it's for lunacy. That's definition of lunacy, not an economic strategy. That's the first thing. The second thing is, we didn't have oil money, so we could not do all of these things. So the issue with this, they didn't have oil money, so they increased the taxes and started collecting $90 billion more per year than that they were collecting in 2015. $90 billion more. So we didn't have oil revenue, so we increased taxes. Never mind that is APNU, AFC, promised to lower taxes. They just increased them in the 5 years. They did not spend the $90 billion on the capital. I made this point last week. So the capital budget, they didn't spend it on roads, school, hospitals, anything. They spent it on the current side of the budget. So effectively, another 5 years of them being in office, every road would have been in pothole state, or schools would have started to decline, or hospitals, everything. And they started already under APNU. Lack of maintenance, farm-to-market roads, drainage and irrigation system, all started falling apart because of short-sightedness. They didn't see the need to spend the money there. So the $90 billion more that they collected, what did it go for in taxes? So it tells you a story. They didn't have oil money, but that didn't constrain them from increasing their own salaries by 50% as soon as they got into office. Didn't you know that we didn't have oil money? So you shouldn't have done that right as soon as you got in. If you didn't have oil money, how is it that you have a special medical treatment for ministers and their families paid for by the taxpayer? You introduced that to go abroad to get medical treatment. We're paying a large sum of money for that. If you didn't have oil money, how come we didn't do that? How come we bought the billions of dollars of new vehicles for people in that period? The budget for new vehicles grew by that. How come we started spending over $1 billion more for rental of buildings from ministers and everyone else? How come we started spending billions more for dietary in government? But on the other hand, we didn't have oil money, so we took away the children's money, etc. It is not about how much money you have. It is about your orientation, their philosophy. This is an elitist group that work for themselves. The elitist group that work for themselves. Now, the money that we have is only, in this year's budget, is only 37% of the budget. Will finance 37% of the budget, all the oil money we collected this year. But where is this going? It's going, take for example, $143 billion now for health care. When we got into office, it was $53 billion. It's 143 billion now that goes there. 175 billion for education this year. It was under 50 billion when we got into office. That's where the growth is. 112 billion for housing this year. That to build more, to provide more land for people and to assist with building homes for people. That alone is $420 billion. Those these three sectors, I can go on. And they ask where, Nigel Yu says, where did the money go? As though you can't read the budget, for Christ's sake. You're not just reading the budget, just look at the profile. It's described in great detail where the money will go, to what projects they will go. But he doesn't believe that building schools are important or housing are important. That's just infrastructure. Or investing in or the hospitals. So that is where the money is going. You know, they spent more money on building offices for ministers and upgrading administrative buildings than we're spending now. In the period when we didn't have oil money, because their comfort mattered more than the schools or the hospitals. Look at the office of the president. Became literally a fortress. We left it there, the office of the president, after so many years of presidency, from Burnham all the way to Ramatar. From Burnham to Ramatar. It was an open place. You had these big chain link fences, people could have seen through it. They spent hundreds of millions of dollars to build a fortress there. A fortress. They didn't see it fit. They didn't have oil money. They didn't see it fit to use it on the children. Because the few buses, the 30 buses that they distributed were all donated. They didn't buy those buses and they took away $8 billion from the 10,000 grant from the children. They didn't have money, but we could have built this big fortress there. You check the amount of money spent on State House. And almost every public building. This is where the resources are going. So when you talk about not having money, look at where we're putting the money. We're not putting it in building presidential palaces like some countries with oil money. It's going into building roads for our people in their communities. So if Nigel Hughes believes on Norton that we're spending too much on roads, then you tell us which community or whose road we shouldn't build. In which community? Tell us across Guyana. You name the communities that you don't want us to build the roads in. Because trust me, every single community wants their road done. Every person wants the road done in front of them. And they don't see this as a luxury. They see it as a necessity because they don't want to walk on a mud dam or anything like that. But for the APNU, that's a luxury. Never mind, Cathy Hughes could have taken contract for herself in Georgetown. But we can't spend the money on building roads for the people in Linden or in Paramakatoy or somewhere else, or Annandale or Buxton. Must spend it on buildings and buying gold bangles for ministers like Patterson and the others. That's where the priority was when they didn't have oil money, but they're not constrained in their spending. How come they run up a debt of 90-something billion at the central bank? That we had to fix when we got into office. Didn't constrain spending. So it's not about who has oil money. Every cent of the oil money is accounted for. It's accounted for now. We've removed direct charges from on the NRF. Every cent has to be appropriated. And it's not like the signing bonus, the money disappears. Every cent of revenue. I saw Nigel Hughes talking about transparency around oil money. The party that tried to steal the 18 million signing bonus talks about transparency in oil revenue. when we passed a law with a provision that says the minister has to publish every cent or go to jail for 10 years if he doesn't publish every cent coming into the NRF. And he talks about transparency in oil revenue. Now, the party that tries to steal that. So it's now where is the money going? It's going to build a power plant that will drop the price of electricity by 50% and cooking gas, $388 million of savings when they're done. So APNU doesn't believe that's a priority. We believe lower electricity prices and stable electricity and low cooking gas prices are important for us. They're trying to kill that project. They're trying to kill that project. The bridge, many of them now think that we shouldn't have built the bridge. Shouldn't build the bridge, but now they're opposed to the toll. The 3 billion people would save there from the two regions, they're opposed to that it be toll-free. But just imagine, Nigel Hughes does not understand, I dealt with it last week, that infrastructure is crucial to spur growth and future prosperity. You can't, as he wants, you can't eat every cent. He said you can't re-eat the bridge. But when that bridge is completed, it means people from Region 4 could live at Wales, where we had to take back the land that you corruptly gave out after closing the sugar estate and sending home nearly 2,000 people from the sugar estate there, and maybe another 3,000 who were private farmers and their workers. 5,000 people lost their job. You handed away the land. We've restored some hope to that area, and now the people can go Region 4 now. Even when we don't have land, they can easily go and live across the river and come across toll-free. They drive over quickly. We can expand the availability of land and opportunities for people. Now all the jobs can go. Investors can migrate across the river and then do so without affecting the viability of their project, especially if they move large volumes of goods and services, because they have a bridge that's permanent, that's free, that's 4-lane in nature, high-span bridge, not the Patterson belief. They said, oh, this one is too much, we should have gone back to open a bridge that opens. So they don't think about this, about how essential that these projects are for future growth in the country. So whilst we were talking about that, Nigel Hughes said, we checked ChatGPT, 100%, he made a post this week, how the $10,000 that we're giving for people to a health voucher, that is transferring, if 500,000 Guyanese can benefit from that, that's transferring $5 billion to private hospitals, friends and family of the PPP. Now, Winston Jordan said the same thing, and that it's a failure of the public health system. Now, how can you really address this clownish sort of analysis? In the United States of America, Medicare is funded by the state, provided by many institutions. In Guyana's case, we're building the 12 hospitals, we're upgrading services in these hospitals. Now we're gonna, from management to technology and staffing and etc. So public health care will be upgraded. But that can't solve all the problems of healthcare in Guyana. We've also given a ton of tax incentives for private healthcare, which is, for example, we remove as soon as we got into office, consistent with our election promise, the corporate tax from education and healthcare. So you've seen an expansion in private care. An initiative like this one, like the one we did with fibroids, like the spectacle, the cervical cancer, now this voucher for every Guyanese. It is to expand on what we have already. So just imagine every Guyanese showed up at a public hospital to get the basic test, because we want the $10,000 to get you the baseline data. Baseline data is important to go in and get tested for hypertension, diabetes. Now we're providing the drugs there to address this, both issues that lead to complication and higher health care costs in the future. Just imagine 500,000 Guyanese were to go this year to the public health system and try to get those tests. You will overload the system. You have to continue, the public health system must continue doing its work, and this is one way of getting service to our people and give them choices. They collect a voucher, they can still choose to go to the Georgetown Hospital and do it, and I'll use the voucher. But now, if they want to look after their own health, they'll collect the voucher and go and get the test done so they don't have to pay for it. This is called caring, and it's addressing a large-scale task. The same thing with cervical cancer or the spectacle. Should we just open the ophthalmology center that they closed, that was built when I was president, and we did thousands of operations for people who needed operation on their eyes, Cuba and here at the ophthalmology center. And the APNU, it was shut down. We reopened it. But should we not give the kids now the money to buy a spectacle and, or get their eyes tested on pensioners? Or let's wait only for the public sector to provide those. It will take 50 years and people wouldn't be seeing, they would die then. The children would grow old and die. That's the APNU mindset. Oh, so this government transferring money to the private sector, friends and family. Not about the beneficiaries, not about the children. It's such a stupid thing. And a clown like Nigel Hughes and Jordan would pass this off as serious analysis. They would pass it off as a serious analysis. How short-sighted can you be? Because they're not equipped to tackle large-scale tasks. They're not equipped. They don't have baseline. And that leads me, coming back to the budget now. So the next one, comment on the budget, is the size of the fiscal deficit. Now, if you want to see how amateur, I don't understand why a leader of a political party, a man who was a lawyer of some standing, I hope, would want to post something like this on his page. So, like someone is giving him a lesson in basic economics, and he posts this on his page. So, first of all, if you look at the corner of it, you can check it on the, no, don't check it on his page, it's a waste of time. He has fresh bake yesterday at the corner. Fresh bake yesterday at the corner of the document. But this is an explanation of fiscal stance. And you see this piece at the bottom here? It leads down here and it says overall GDP. Non-oil economy plus oil economy is overall GDP. How profound? How profound? You have to add the oil economy and the non-oil economy, and then that gives you the total economy. That's a big part of the chart. If you have to teach somebody this, and the man is so impressed with it that he posts this on his page, we're in a sad shape in this country. Sad, sad shape. I have never seen anything like this in my life. Trust me, I've been around a lot of people. But they get so impressed with any person can hand them something. And it's when you don't know, you just get impressed with garbage. This is garbage sort of thing. And this is all trying to say that the non-oil deficit would be bigger than the oil deficit. Everybody, right? Everyone knows that. That you don't need a piece of paper to get that talk to you. And then to post this picture with freshly baked yesterday at the corner of it, at the top. This is like a real clown show. So the fact of the matter is that the fiscal deficit in relation to GDP has come down from last year. It's 5.9% this year. I think last year it was 7.3%. And that's a decent number. The fiscal deficit has come down. They talk about the primary balance, but the fiscal deficit has come down. But all of this big thing to try to confuse him about primary balance and current account and capital account, etc., is just to make that very same point. Totally confused individual. Now the size of the debt, that's another criticism. Oh, PPP is borrowing too much. So the debt has grown to nearly $6 billion now, $5.9 billion. So here are some things that we have to talk about, which I've spoken about before. Are we leaving the next generation of our country in bankruptcy, with an insolvent economy? That is what APNU did. The debt payment at that time under APNU, the debt to GDP ratio at the beginning of our term was 900% of GDP. The external debt was $2.1 billion. Our economy was about $300 million US. So that means the debt that we owed, external debt alone, forget the domestic debt, was about 7 times the size of our economy. The debts that we owe, 7 times the size of our economy. In the United States today, their debt is 124% of the size of their economy, about $36 trillion. So in Guyana's case, what is our total debt now? But we're only dealing with external debt first. Let's deal with external debt. Our external debt today is $2.2 billion. It was $2.1 billion when the economy was $300 million. Our economy today is $25 billion. Our economy is 71 times bigger than it was in the past. So the external debt to GDP in Guyana is 8.8%, down from 700% under APNU, around that level. So that's the external debt. The rest of it is domestic debt through the Treasury bill that we issue, which could easily be repaid. The external debt is an important measure because you have to find foreign currency, etc., to service this debt. It's 8.8% of GDP, one of the lowest in the world. And you tell us, you're talking about judging us on this when it was nearly 700% when you got in, when you left office, of GDP. So, and if you add the internal debt, it's 24% of GDP. When you add it at 900% of GDP, 24%. So you tell me these are some of the most sustainable figures in the world. And even the Starbuck News article recently quoted the Minister of Finance, who pointed out that we're using just under about 5% of revenue to service debt now. It used to be scheduled debt payments was 153% of revenue. Actual was 94% in the early period. Today it's 5.2% of revenue. Some of the lowest figures. Some of the lowest figures in the world again. So we're only using 5.2% of revenue, but we're burdening the budget by this borrowing. But you're using 100% of revenue to pay debts, external debt alone, and you didn't leave us with a burden. It's nonsense. It's only people who don't have an understanding of economics or are ignorant of the history, the economic history of the country, that would make such a point. Because if they did, they would see the phenomenal progress our country has made and how more stable it is now, how our macroeconomics have improved, and many countries are envious of this. Our figures are the best in this region, and maybe around the world. So to have a Norton talking about it, oh, that's high or not, they don't do any analysis. Oh, they're burdening us with debt. So that's another thing. So it was the deficit they talk about, although the deficit is coming down, in spite of the fact that oil money is only 37% of the budget. They talk about their owning, they didn't have oil money, but we already dealt with that, what they did with the non-oil money. And remember, as soon as we got back, we practically gave up all the revenue that they were collecting because we reversed the taxes on electricity, on water, on data, a whole range of stuff. So we gave that out. But it's their philosophy. You give them all the oil money in the world, they would, as Norton, the APNU just pointed out, they'd spend it all in one go. They'd spend 2 years of oil money in 1 year just handing it out and nothing to show for it. After that, you're bankrupt as a country again. This is their economics. So let's deal now with the one about friends, poor people. There's no help for poor people in this country. So in Guyana, let's look at the taxation system. Let's just talk about taxation. So in the budget, before the budget, I told you that we wanted to reward people who work harder. Some of the reporters here were lobbying for overtime. I know a particular one who was on this all the time. And so, what did we do? We did 4 things that would allow people who work harder to keep more money than that they earn and to pay less taxes. The first is increasing the threshold, the tax-free threshold. The second is to lower the rates. The third is to give an allowance for overtime. And the fourth is if you get a second job, I'm not saying you should. Many people abroad getting second job. But if you do, you put in an effort and get a second job, because in many places now there is so much a demand for labor. It's because we have such a demand that people can find second jobs now. Not the other way around, that we're telling people go and work a second job. Like the clownish, again, explanation that APNU has. So you can keep more money. So they love poor people so much. But they had put the VAT on everything. Electricity, water, data, etc. People paid that. Poor people were paying that because they have to consume water and electricity and data and everything else. They also increase the taxes. So let me give you an example of what the threshold was. So under APNU, the tax threshold the last year was $65,000 per month. So anytime you work above $65,000, you started paying taxes. We have now increased that to $130,000. We have increased the threshold to $130,000. So if you work $130,000 or less now, you don't pay taxes at all. No personal income tax. Under APNU, you have to start paying taxes at $65,000 anytime you earn more than $65,000. So they were taxing the people that they consider poor now, they were taxing them heavily. Then, so there were two rates, or in fact one rate. In 2014, there was a flat rate of 30%. So under APNU in 2018, they reduced the 30% to 28%. If you had, I think it was $1,400 or $120,000, $120,000 per month, you were taxed at above your threshold. You were taxed at 28%, down from 30. And then after that, they increased the rate from 30 to 40%. 30 to 40%. So let's take an example. So 165,000 threshold, no taxes. Then if you add 120,000 to that, 185,000, you pay a tax rate of 28% under APNU. And then if you hit beyond 185,000, you started paying 40% of your income. 40%. So that meant 40% rate is like for rich people in some parts of the world. APNU moved it from 30 to 40. The same Winston Jordan who talks about, oh, there's nothing, this is a hodgepodge budget, or some shopping like that. Hodgepodge budget, there's no systematic way of tackling poverty. He increased it, so he was saying that you had to be wealthy by applying a 40% rate anytime you earn a salary of over $185,000. So what we did now, so if you now, the first 130,000, you don't pay any taxes, then the next 120,000, that's 250,000, you pay 25%, we lower it from 28 to 25, and then beyond 250,000, we drop the rate from 40% to 35%. So that is now what you have. So for the first 250,000 of your income, you just pay the 130, no taxes. Then up to 250, you pay 25% of the remaining part. That is the 120,000, and then thereafter. Now, if you get overtime, so you have to add to the 250,000 another 50,000, and then if you have a second job, you then add 50,000. So potentially, it's not to the 250, but to the 130. You add 50,000, 50 plus 50. So for $230,000 of your income now, you don't have to pay any taxes. If you have a second job and you're getting overtime, 50,000. 230,000, no taxes you have to pay. That is if you have a second job and a, an overtime. You earn overtime. If you don't, you get up to a 130,000 tax-free, up from 65,000 under APNU. It's a simple thing. Anybody would see this is progressive. And then if you have kids, you then add to the $230,000, $10,000 per month each for each kid. So up to $250,000. If you have all of those metrics in your favor, you don't need to pay taxes at all. This is pro people and pro poor. The Jordan, the APNU, they remember Nigel Users defending the withdrawal of the money from people, their children, in a letter he wrote. He will defend this because it's fiscal imperative that they increase the taxes on people earning $185,000 or more from 30 to 40% under APNU. You were paying 40%. Many people don't even know they were paying that. This is the APNU track record. So I'd like to hear them, Norton, speak about that. When their economic spokesperson go there to Parliament, now they want to take the threshold to 500 or 400,000, you know, the usual nonsense. So they're gonna share out more money than they have and give up all the taxes too. So I don't know what we will walk around in loincloths in the country again, right? Everybody might be good on the eyes, but for some people, but I don't think it's a good economic strategy. So the thing is that alone on the tax measures is vital. The fact that we are tackling poverty and poor people, because look at the cost of living impact. So they said, oh, this $9 billion that you have in the budget for direct interventions on cost of living is not adequate. That's grown to $9 billion, but they don't count the $90 billion that we will give up because we maintain the zero excise tax that they had on the sale of gasoline and diesel. It's $90 billion so that every person gets a subsidy of $500 and something now for every gallon of gas. They don't mention that. They don't mention the electricity subsidy that people got. We kept the rate constant from 2020 to now because there's another 70 to 80 million US dollars subsidy there. The mortgage subsidy. They don't count all of those things. When you look at the cost of living interventions, when you look at using the old freight rate, pre-COVID freight rate, to address in the calculation of the taxes, the CET and the VAT, because it's levied on CIF value. We're losing billions of dollars there too, but it has helped to offset some of the increase in shipping costs globally, which could affect cost of living. All of those interventions, they don't look at, oh, 9 billion, as though 9 billion is the only effort. They don't say that in the public sector alone, disposable income, or in this year's budget, when you add last year, it said $100 billion more than 2020. The public servants are going to earn $107 billion more per year than they were earning in 2020. You didn't hear about that. This is adding disposable income to people. They don't talk about the 60,000 people who are working now, who are now working, who had lost their jobs. What's the best way of fighting poverty? Is to get a job. APNU took away jobs from people. Imagine they weren't concerned when the 7,000 sugar workers went home about the impact on poverty in those communities. The whole of Berbice was in malaise. Not just PPP strongholds, but APNU strongholds, because that was disposable income for the region. They did that. The bauxite workers, when you laid off, you caused 1,000 bauxite workers to be sent home. When you caused the 500 people in Linden in Region 10 who had a community forest lease that we gave them that were supplying Baishan with the logs. When you took away that market from them, those people lost their jobs, the 1,000 and the 500, and then another 85 at the call center. These were direct interventions that led to the loss of nearly 2,000 jobs in Region 10. When we try to do the part-time jobs, they complain about it. Well, you weren't concerned about poverty there. When a person loses a job and doesn't have an income, how could he afford anything? Now you're concerned about poverty, and we don't have. With generation of jobs and expanding income is one of the sure ways of ensuring people have to get out of poverty. One of the sure ways of people getting out of poverty is to get better quality health care to them so they don't have to pay for it. So at the Georgetown Hospital, if you go in an emergency, you can get a stent and walk out for free. You can go and get a knee replacement for free now that you had to pay for in the private hospital. That's one way of tackling it. When you pay for people's scholarship, and we've done 50,000 of them, that's one way of giving them the tools to get out of poverty. And this Jordan, this miserable man who increased taxes on all the people, say, oh, there's only 9 billion, that's not a way to tackle poverty. Doesn't look at it, everything. When you get a house lot to a person and they get a cheap mortgage and start owning their home, that's a way to get out of poverty. They don't see all of this together, that is part of a whole. So this is why the analysis or the lack of is so rudimentary to warrant the analysis of the budget. It's so rudimentary, sometimes it doesn't warrant a response, but you have to go through this charade of responding to them all the time because somehow they think they hit a mother lode of knowledge. This time it's nonsense they're talking. So that is how we've been tackling poverty in multifaceted ways, equipping our people with the tools and doing it in a non-discriminatory manner. You don't have to look at, to get a scholarship or a job, you don't have to be PNC member anymore. So that is on poverty and the next one is friends and family and acquaintances. That PPP is sharing out all the money to the friends and family, everything here. Imagine a Nigel Hughes could say that. He was a beneficiary of this friends and family thing in a big way. When they had to do the promised constitutional reform in their manifesto, they gave him, I think, the job. He did a report. We can't find the report now. In 2016, nothing else happened afterwards. No report. They didn't pursue it. He did this report. He didn't consult opposition. He didn't consult anyone. I gather we spent $20 million on that. That's friends and family. When his wife was getting contracts in our own ministry, that's friends and family. When Alston Stewart was getting this contract now to supply scales, and they gave him something million dollars, that was friends and family. When they gave land, thousands of acres to connected PNC people at Wales, in Dallawalla Creek, in Berbice, almost everywhere. In Linden, Lowenfield, etc., it was all friends and family, the MPs, etc., the same Amans and all of them. So our friends and family are the 50,000 people who are going to get their house lots now. Not the Lowenfield who will get 216,000 acres of prime land not 1,000, 216 acres of prime land in Region 10 that we could have used for housing. So those are our friends and family. We are happy to say these people who are getting house lots are friends and family of the PPP. We're happy to say there are 4,000 contractors. In Linden, there are nearly 500 of them in Region 10. And here in Region 4, nearly 1,000 contractors. Many are Afro-Guyanese. New contractors, they are our friends and family. They are our friends and family. It's and Jam, they're friends and family too. But contrast that with the Minister of Housing giving her own husband contract in her ministry. Cathy Hughes taking contracts herself in her own ministry. They don't see anything wrong with that. They don't see anything wrong with that. You look at the people who are getting and look at the scale of it happening. They would have never happened on the PNC or the AFC. I can go down this friends and family thing almost in every sector. In jobs, the friends and family business, in jobs, in almost every area. There was a corrupt cabal, incestuous cabal. With nepotism was seen as the thing. They didn't even see it wrong. They didn't see these things as being wrong, so they pursued it with a vigor that was unmatched. And now, it's like the election thing too. The biggest riggers are going to claim we're trying to rig the elections. So the most corrupt people who practice the friends and family thing in a major way, they are the ones who are now accusing us. Look at the scholarships. You could just trace the friends and family in the scholarship. How many ministers? The 50,000 people getting the scholarships through GROW, GOAL, WIN, and BIT. Those are our friends and family. We love them very much. We love them very much, and we will continue to give them more scholarships because we want everybody to be our friends and family. Nigel Hughes, how come he got there? He was part of the friends and family with ExxonMobil too, because it seems like a friends and family thing when the AFC was in charge of the negotiation. Your colleague in the party was negotiating on the one side for the government, and you were on the other side. That was a friends and family business too. Every week it's about that. First, it used to be that all the Indo-Guyanese are our friends and family. Any Indian person who get a contract. Now once you're close to the PPP or you're Afro-Guyanese or anything, you're friends and family too. As though people who support the PPP don't have a right to work, etc. They have a right to work, and we will encourage them to do so, and they will make progress like everyone is making progress. But when they are in office, they wouldn't even help ordinary supporters of the party. They kept everything for themselves. Cathy Hughes could have easily given someone else. If they're so concerned about anyone else, a small contract to another Afro-Guyanese company who are supplying the services she was supplying, it's PR services. Kept it for herself. So this is the friends and family thing, and they're shamelessly talking about it. Nigel Hughes of all persons, friends and family. So I don't know, I might have missed some of the other things that they're saying, but it doesn't help, nothing for anyone. I can go on. It's a long list of stupid things, as I said before, that they came up with. If you trace it, those are the key themes that they work on. I'm not going to continue here on these. I just want you to look at the total measures in the budget, look at the details of the budget. Now they're going to be incapable of doing this. So tomorrow, expect, when the debate starts, the racism. So it will be, they will do ethnic count there all the time. Everything would be about race. Then the usual theme, that I just mentioned today. Nonsense. Oh, the budget has nothing for everyone, doesn't have for poor people, too much on infrastructure, all of these things, which we have debunked already. So it's not gonna be very inspiring to watch. But let me just make it clear, the PPP in the budget before the elections, as we promised, we made university education free. We added TechVoc education to that too. So all tertiary education is free now. We promised that when we campaigned for the people's vote in the country in 2020. We went out and talked to them. We said we will do this. We will write off the student loans. We made our commitment. We kept that already. Billions have already been written off. We kept our commitment. We said we will do 20,000 scholarships, online scholarships. We are on track to do about 30-something thousand online scholarship through Goal alone, and then the other scholarships are coming through direct training. So we've kept that promise too. We promised to double old age pension. We kept the promise. We promised to give the children the $50,000 per year in the 5 years. We kept that promise. We promised to double public assistance. We did that. We promised to raise the threshold. We've doubled the threshold. We promised to lower taxes. We have lowered the taxes. We promised to give the joint service back their bonus. We did that. We promised to restore help to the miners. We did all that too. So a lot of this, soon you're going to hear about it. You ask them about what they promise. What they promise. So we kept our word to the people of this country. We worked faithfully to expand employment opportunities. There are 15,000 people now working on part-time jobs paid for by government, fully paid for, apart from the thousands of others who are now working in the private sector. And how did we do this? By creating incentives to generate more investment and job. Norton said, oh, there's nothing for investment here. We are some of the highest levels of investment. Look in tourism alone. Look at the hotels, 9 new international hotels. Remember, they didn't even see the need to build the Marriott or keep the Marriott. We have 9 new international hotels now under construction. And he doesn't see, oh, we're not giving enough incentive. Because of our incentive to education and healthcare, that is why today we have seen much private investment in these areas. So maybe I should end here. It's getting a little bit late today. So useless, I would say useless, amateurish, childish, lacking profundity, lacking any depth. It's like saying things that just come off the top of your head. And you know, Nigel Hughes and the others can do this. They can do this because he dodges questions at his press conference. He blunders on everything. I saw a letter from Nikhil Sankar, and then suddenly he wrote back. The man is like a child. He responds to everybody. He wrote back and saying, you know, so what if I said the number is 1,200 and I didn't have this is talking about us killing young Afro-Guyanese, the lie that he's been talking about for all these years. So he said, so what if the number is 1,200 or 400? It didn't matter. It doesn't matter. Well, there's a big difference in the numbers because you've been lying all the time. So he said, let's work together to have a COI. The COI that they hid from when they were in government. What did he say about the COI then? But we're going to have the COI, but and you're going to see the perpetrators. It was a lie, a big lie, and they're hoping to stir up racism again. Racism again. So, very, very childish display all week long, posting nonsense every time. Like anybody sends him something, he posts. Like a child in a shop. Thank you.
Mr. Jagdeo, Dennis Shabral, Damara Waves. Sir, I have a few quick questions for you, please.
Yes.
One, to what extent will the Guyana government be willing to take back some of the persons who might be earmarked for deportation from the United States? Number two, could you elaborate on what is the reason for the slump in the projected economic growth this year as stated in the national budget? And thirdly, is there a market feasibility, not a technical or other feasibility, a market feasibility on the gas to shore project, and where can that be located? And fourthly, I heard you justify the money being spent on providing for tests at healthcare facilities. Could you say what safeguards are there to ensure that this money is not funneled into entities that might be perceived to be supportive of the government or the governing party? And fifthly, lastly, that's finally, in order to reduce or eliminate any controversy over the credibility of the election results, to what extent will the PPP be willing to support amendments to the relevant laws to use electronic fingerprint verification as an option at polling stations, as well as the Constitution for a possible re-registration?
So I think I dealt extensively with a couple of these already. So I don't have much to add because I think it's self-explanatory. I think it's a storm in a teacup created by APNU and AFC to distract the people of this country from their sordid track record of stealing elections. I dealt with the whole issue of biometrics extensively and how it cannot be used as the sole, as the commissioner, the chair of GCOM pointed out, to deny people the right to vote. So I don't want to go. I saw Vincent Alexander saying that they don't agree with that you could prevent people actually from voting using these biometrics, which is electronic biometrics. It's already taken in a manual form. So we're not going to go down that route. Secondly, the chair of GCOM has made it clear that the timeline to go back now and do electronic or the taking of fingerprints electronically rather than manually as they have been done would take time. And therefore, it's not feasible to do before the elections. I don't want to second guess a constitutional agency, but it's not going to add one bit of one iota of greater transparency to the voting system. In fact, we have robust safeguards already that have been demonstrated in the past to prevent people who are not supposed to vote from voting. And so I believe it's a non-issue, just helped along by the media reporting every week because things seem to be slow, by getting these useless people from the WPA and the others to repeat the same old issue all along without any merit. So we're not going to be led down that road. If the GCOM approaches, the commission approaches the government of Guyana to say We need further legislation that will enhance the transparency of the elections. Then they will get our full support. They'll get our full support. But we're not going to fall prey to a distracting plot by these people, the riggers, by the riggers. The second issue is that, again, this is feeding into a conspiracy theory. Right along, it's like this anecdotal way. So we give each person a voucher, and they would be able to go to a large number of institutions that do these tests. They get their vouchers. They can then choose where they want to go. So in any case, which institution you think is PPP? Which of these institutions that's making all of this investment is PPP? Which one would you not want us to work with in Guyana? Which institution? So that's the issue. If people are making investments in healthcare, then as Guyanese, they also can benefit from services procured by the state, as is done in the United States of America and any part of the world. But to say that when we give a person a $10,000 voucher, that we're funneling money to a particular entity, we just give people choices here. They have greater choices. They can choose. You can choose not to collect the 10,000. Go to the public hospital, because it's done for free there. You might just have to wait a little bit longer. If 500,000 people showed up there, or show up there for the same test, it might not be 500,000. Might be 50,000. But if they show up, they would overload our institution. It is this narrow-mindedness. It's always like counting the pennies when there is a big picture all the time to improve people's health care across the country. So that's the second one. What are the two other questions, Ernest?
Or the others are having to do with deportation?
By the way, yes, the deportation, if they're Guyanese, then they don't have a choice but to take them back. What are we going to do? Refuse to take our people back?
Well, that had happened about 2 decades ago.
But we would have to take our people back if they're Guyanese. Or you know a specific person that we should take back?
I'm just going on what had happened a few years ago.
It's not referred Burke, my dear friend Burke.
Where the PP administration had refused.
You asked the question, I answered it. Yes, we will take our people back if they're deported.
And any safeguards with respect to pressure on the social sectors, and well, we know there's a historical concern about criminals.
Yeah, but we don't know the magnitude. We believe that if our country can absorb people who come from Venezuela, most are Guyanese, but they're non-Guyanese too. And if we can absorb them in our country and they're working here and they're living here decently, then why shouldn't we do that for our own people? If they're deported back home, this is home to them. The governments don't have much of a choice. There could be verification. That is what we've had in the past when we've had discrepancies between people. We heard in one case, a guy said he's Nigerian and he was sent here. That is what was held up some of the issuance of documents. But once they're Guyanese and it's verified to be Guyanese, then you have to take your people back.
The government will be pressing for effective and efficient verification before accepting them back.
Yeah, but no, I'm not saying. I said once they're Guyanese, so you would have to, of course, show that they're Guyanese. We don't want to take We don't want to have people from other countries deported to Guyana. They should go to their own countries. So, yes, and the other one is about, I saw this thing with the AFC posted. They keep, after getting mud in their face, right, because of their uselessness, they're now trying to hide from that issue by saying that the Exim Bank will not make a loan to Guyana and offer the gas to energy project, and then they were proven wrong. Exim Bank made a loan of over $500 million to Guyana. So they now, Nigel Liu started it again. For a lawyer, this guy is really mediocre. And so they filed a Freedom for Information request, and I saw the people responded and said, we don't have this, there seems to be no feasibility study. However, you got to contact Exim Bank now, because from what is in the public domain, we have not seen that published. So the same letter that he posted, it says, you may want to contact Exim Bank directly. Now I have here a due diligence report Exim Bank did, which looks at technical feasibility and financial feasibility. And it was done by a company called Sargent and Lundy for Exim Bank itself. But the AFC and the others, the APNU in this country, believe that the way they run Guyana, the leadership there, and the way they run their affairs now, the leadership there as cake shop operation, that is how a bank like Exim Bank would run. They would just hand over $500 million to a country, just like that, and not do their own due diligence on a project. And the due diligence I was talking about surrounding the feasibility. They would have never made a loan to a project like this. They did a 197-page due diligence report that we have, but it's the property of the Exim Bank. It is their property. They were done by, they were the clients. They paid for it. And I told you the company that did it. So I don't want to get into this. What is it? This face.
I was asking about the Guyana government
kind of nonsense that AFC is with every week. The project is going to be built. It had a loan. In spite of what they said, it will be completed. It will generate power. It will cut electricity prices by half. It will result in significant savings on cooking gas. We'll get about $380 million per year of savings to the Guyanese public, US dollars of savings if we use all the gas. That is what will happen. I don't waste time behind people who couldn't even conceptualize a project. It's a waste of time. I'm not into self-flagellation every week. Every week, that's what they're into. That we gotta beat up ourselves for somehow we're doing something wrong. You will see the project. These are useless people that couldn't put together a bridge, a feasibility study on the bridge. Patterson took an unsolicited bid and got charged with it. Couldn't even complete a feasibility study on a bridge and do it clean. And you're going to tell me about I should bother with Nigel Hughes and who don't understand the difference between what an economy, a country's GDP means, to talk about due diligence on a project like this? I don't waste my time, Dennis, behind these people.
What I was trying to find out is whether the Guyana government
they only
itself
exist because you got a media here that helps them along by stirring the same thing over and over, and a kite show news that distorts everything.
In fact, it's the Guyana government has a feasibility study.
Yeah, we dealt with that years ago. Years ago, I spoke about that the numbers are so phenomenal That's why we launched. We said we will do this from opposition without even doing the feasibility study. What is there to say what is new about this? Technically feasible. Have people built pipelines before in the world? Yes, most of the world can build a pipeline. Have they built power plants before? Yes. So what's wrong with using your own gas to build a pipeline where the numbers are so apparent to even a clunk? That's why I said it's a no-brainer. So I'm not going to get into this every week for people who are ignorant of basic things, who lie about their miler fall for the same reason. It's a miler all over again. And you know we were not robust enough in that period, taking them on a miler, when all the lies were told about $2 billion of debt, which was a lie because it was a contingent liability. They talk about water running out of a miler, 30 cents per kilowatt hour, and we allow them to kill it. They're not killing this project. They're not killing it. So I'm not. And then another question. I'm not wasting my time bearing them on this, Dennis.
So you won't say whether a yes or no, there is a Guyana
I
government
dealt with that
feasibility.
100 times before. Go and check my previous answers too.
On, sir,
Yes.
the economic growth.
Yes. Oh, that's
Yes,
an
could you elaborate on that?
It's a simple thing. It's explained in the budget. Yes. So we have a 10.6% growth with a minimal growth in the oil production this year. So the non-oil sector is growing by over 13%. Now, you tell me around the world, a 13% growth, which country? No developed country is doing that. And very few, I don't even know any, maybe many developing countries that are touching that. This is the non-oil growth alone. Overall growth is over 10%. So I'm pleased with that. In a year when we don't have oil coming in. So the next year, when the new FPSO comes in, the growth will jump up back to 30-40% when the next FPSO comes in from 2026. So it will jump again in that regard back up. But it is so heartwarming to me to see in a year when there's no growth, practically no growth in oil production, that we could post a 10% growth in GDP when we have had a base, an economic base that has moved to $25 billion now.
But do you
It's very good to me. I'm pleased with it. Extremely pleased.
Yeah, what I'm trying to find out, how is the absence of a new FPSO going to contribute to a decline in the growth? And
every year you start from scratch.
Do you have any measurement in terms of the declining number of barrels per oil?
No. But listen, Dennis, read this stuff. So you use words like decline and slump. Are you saying that the norm is 40% growth every year? So anything below that would be a slump. Every year you start off fresh in planning an economy. The norm is not 40% anywhere in the world. Right.
Yes.
So when you say slump, I talk about phenomenal growth because every year it's the goods, the aggregate of goods and services produced in the economy for that year that constitutes the GDP. Nigel Hughes would need another piece of paper for this. So we start afresh. So this year we have an FPSO that is no new FPSO would start producing this year. So that is one of the, so we are basically have very low growth this year in oil. And so most of our growth is coming from the non-oil economy, which is great for a country like ours. Because when the new production starts with a new FPSO, it will jump again. But it's not the GDP growth that matters. I keep saying it's the development in the country and where we utilize the resources. So it does matter to some extent, but I mean, we don't have an obsession with that. In fact, I'm so happy about it.
Trishelle Silvers.
Yes.
Good afternoon. Trishelle Silvers, Guyana Times.
Yes.
There has been, I have 3 questions.
Yes.
There has been an increase in gas bottle explosions in home with at least 2 persons dead. Is it something government has or is looking into currently? My second question, during his inauguration speech, President Trump spoke about plans to pursue oil drilling in the U.S. Is government concerned about this and the impact it could have on Guyana's oil and gas sector? And third, one of the budget measures is the removal of VAT on backup generators. Is this only for commercial use or household as well?
I don't know how you will do the household because this might be a difficult thing, but I need to clarify that. But I think it was mainly commercial. So we'll clarify that. I need to clarify because the household would be everyone. It means that we should have said just removal of taxes on generators. Once they use backup, it means something else. So I'd have to clarify that, whether it's household or not. Gas bottle explosion. I think this should be a standard thing for the EP and the others. They should have. I saw somebody sent me something, but the regulatory bodies have to look at this. The GA and also the EPA should launch an investigation immediately to look into this. I would find out if they're doing that. On the inauguration of President Trump, there is a concern that with increased production in the U.S. that there could be an oversupply of the market. That would have an impact on the prices. You have to take account of all these variables when you plan future expenditure. That is why our dear friends from the other side who are pretending as though oil money would always be there and that it's guaranteed. Next year, it's not guaranteed. It's not guaranteed. So if you start telling people you don't have to work, you can get free money all the time, no country in the world does that. And so that is why you have to be cautious. There is that possibility that prices could come down, but also the converse of it is that, so that will go towards increasing supply, which forces or puts a downward pressure on oil prices. On the other hand, President Trump is exiting the Paris Agreement and also stopping the renewable energy projects in the US. They said windmill projects and all of the others. So if the supply would have been enhanced by renewable energy coming on stream that are not going to come on stream any longer. So that would tend to increase the demand for fossil fuel related sort of investment on demand. So it could balance out there.
Can you say specifically any concerns Guyana might have currently?
No, as an oil producing country, it's not a concern. It is something that the policymakers have to analyze when you think about your policies here in Guyana, your budgetary policies, and everything else for that matter. So we are very much aware of what he has said, and I just pointed out the frame in which we're using to analyze these. On one hand, you may have increased supply. On the other hand, a decrease of supply from renewable sources and less renewable sector investment, so hence the need for more fossil fuel related investments.
Good afternoon, Milton Granum for Starbrook News. Has the PPP or the government hired any U.S. lobbying firm to lobby the U.S. government as the elections are coming up? And if so, can you tell us the name of the firm?
So the PPP has not. I don't know, the government had firms, but I think some of their contracts expired. So they may be in the process of foreign affairs, maybe in the process of concluding new agreements. But not the PPP. We have not hired any lobbying firm. And there is a big difference between the two. Remember the last government, we're still not sure who paid for the lobbying firm up to now, because they conflate the government money with the party's money.
Can I have Senator Jagdeo?
Hello.
And that's Williams Culture News. Sir, can you say what percentage of the 2025 budget is being funded by loans?
In what?
What percentage of the budget this year is being funded by loans?
So if you look at the oil and non-oil revenue, just go and read the document, right? There is a table that gives you in the estimates, I think it's the operations of the public sector. Let me see if I have it for you. So you will see here two areas basically. If non-oil revenue is about $500 billion, and non-oil revenue, if you include inflows from GRIF and the LCDS, would be another 500 million. So that means about 300 odd billion would be funded through loans. So just read it there, right? I'm trying to find the exact piece for you. Let me see. Oh, go and check this section. You would see it here. Public sector financial operations, and you can see how much of the revenue, the exact figures would be 554 in revenue, plus 16 billion of GRIF inflows, but 41 billion from carbon credit inflows, which would give about 511, and then 512 is from NRF withdrawal. So that is $1 billion there, $1 trillion, and then the rest, it's from the other source.
Good afternoon, sir.
Yeah, sure.
Rihanna, Kaiser News. You remember a couple of weeks ago I asked a question about the gas to energy.
No, I don't remember.
The feasibility study.
I don't remember. I don't remember anything about the gas to energy and Kaiser News. I don't remember anything.
Well, let me refresh your memory.
No, please don't. If it's on gas to energy, I've dealt enough with that. It's done. I'm not dealing anymore with I'm not going into this big charade. You write what you have to write, the stupidness that the Kaiser News write, and we're working on completing the project for the people of this country. Move on to the next question. No gas to energy anymore. Dennis tested my patience, so I reached a limit with Dennis on this matter. So I answered Dennis. No. Yeah, so no more on that. Move on. Let's go. What other question you have? That's it?
That's it.
Oh, God. You're saying you gas the energy all the time. You got a lot of gas talking, a lot of bilge around the place. Yeah. Okay. Anything else? Thank you.